Are those old $10 wire crimpers that you're using right now slowly turning your car's wiring harness into a fire hazard? The answer may be yes. Every weak crimp that gets made may introduce corrosion, heat from excessive resistance, and an intermittent electrical fault that could drive you insane. I'm going to be breaking down the science behind creating a gas-tight seal versus crushing the wire to death. Ratcheting wire crimpers have come down a lot on price and are a lot more affordable for us, the hobbyists, and are no longer a luxury for the professionals and high-end builders. You can get your hands on these and make professional level crimps at home in your garage. This came in a set, was less than $50, and may be an easy way to level up your wiring game. Now, I've been skeptical of the ratcheting crimper for a very long time, questioning, can they really do that much better of a job than the old trusty wire strippers and crimpers that I've got here? Let me show you what I've learned as I've dived down this rabbit hole. So a little bit of backstory and theory. So the theory on these guys is that they provide a more consistent crush. They're able to support the entire terminal, and in doing so, it creates a gas-tight, call it airtight seal. But basically, it's just creating a solid seal where air don't get into the crimp itself. Now, is it possible that air and moisture and stuff can still get in there? Yes, absolutely. But the intent is to be able to create a seal, a mechanical crimp and seal so solid that it's effectively impenetrable. And when it becomes that impenetrable and solid and consistent, it's harder to pull apart. This helps ensure that those wires have an extremely strong mechanical connection. And the nice thing is about a lot of these ratchet crimpers is you can get some that have fixed dies, or you can get them with replaceable dies. Now, with replaceable dies, you usually wind up with a whole pile of connectors that you'll use a lot, occasionally, and a couple of those crimps that you may never use in the entire time you're playing with wires. And that's okay. But having that opportunity to handle some of those more weird connectors like fuse blocks, terminals, and stuff, it's actually really convenient as opposed to fighting with the $10 crimpers, trying to get everything danced around in there right, and having a questionable crimp when you're done. Okay, that's great and all, but how the heck does that actually work? Well, let's just grab a length of this 16 gauge wire. I'm using pink because I have the most of it sitting around on a roll, and if I'm going to burn some up, I might as well burn up the stuff I'm not using much of. Am I right? And if you're curious about any of the tools and terminal sets and wire that I'm using, I'll make sure there's links in the description so that way you can get your hands on all of this stuff. Anyways, so first and foremost, I'm going to use the brand new strippers that came in the kit because, frankly, they're sharp. I've been using these guys for an extremely long time, and they're showing their age. Remember, 16 gauge wire, and we're just going to go... Oh, that was 14. Oh well, still stripped. We're just going to roll that guy around because you don't want frayed wires, and we're going to do this. Put that guy over it. Whoop. Hold on 1 second. There we go. That's better. Now I want to recognize that I probably just introduced a whole bunch of skin oils that are possible places for corrosion. Now, the way that these crimpers have always worked, and I've learned over time, is that you want to put the pin or the pointy part on the back side of the connector and basically put the connector into the barrel where the seam is. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what's going on here. Whoop, wrong side. There we go. And a thing to keep in mind is a lot of these pliers, they are just good for 22 to 10 gauge. That's a pretty big range, am I right? So when you squeeze it down, this whole portion is largely revolving around grip strength. And it's actually very easy to overdo and see the terminal flex away from where it was. What seems to be the problem here? Well, you can see that it's just contacting and putting a crush in one point. And as you look around over here, let me get a pointer here, you can see that there's room for air and moisture to get around the connector right there. But the thing is that actually introduces a lot of potential failure points. And with all that crush that I put on it, instead of being nice and uniform over the length of that barrel, it's now more or less focused in one spot, and if you squeeze too hard, you actually run the risk of breaking the individual strands on the wire. Now, granted, it's solid and has a very good, pull test, but it could be better. So let's contrast this with the ratcheting ones and see how that works out. Just ping that guy free. Make sure all the strands are together, and we're going to put this in here, over that. Now, the way that these are supposed to work is the little square is supposed to push on the seam itself. So let's, I got to get my hands oriented correctly so that way I do this right. See, and we're just going to go scrimp. And an interesting thing, because it's in the die, now it's like locked in there because it was so nicely supported. And when it pops out, you can see how nice all of this truly is. There's no deformation, there's no extra marks or the marks aren't there. There's no big monster divot. Instead, you have a nice uniform crush over a much larger surface area. And bringing the pointer back, you can see that around this side, there's a lot less area for air to get in. Now, there's a little bit on this side, and we can fix that simply by giving it another squisharoonie here. I'm just going to go have my knuckles pop. But you can now see that we've effectively eliminated every possible airspace for air to get in there. Now, granted, there's still some way moisture can get in there, don't get me wrong, but that's where you heat shrink when you're done. So one more thing I want to point out before we move on is that represents a lot more surface area for the mechanical crimp and likely has a much higher pull strength on it. Okay, so a non-insulated terminal, that's great and all, but how does it handle those infamous plastic barrel ones that everyone loves to hate but get used all the time? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's ping the nasty end off that one. And nasty, I just mean the one crimped with the hand crimper. We're going to pull that off. And we're going to put this guy on it. Now, I did change the jaws to the insulated terminal ones, and we're just going to give this a squish. Oh, goodness. I don't know about you, but that looks many times better than just about any crimp that I would put on one of those with ye old hand crimpers here. Usually using these, my knuckles pop 6 times and it just leaves one little in the middle of it. So that makes for a much more positive retention on that. Now, I'm not going to crimp this guy down because frankly, these terminals are a bit expensive. This has the wire heat shrink on it. But there's also a set of dies for this that evenly crushes that barrel down over the wire. So you can see the advantage here in that it makes a much more solid crimp no matter what you're doing. So the last one I want to talk about are these. This is often used inside of like GM or Ford fuse blocks. For inside the fuse blocks, there's a little retention thingy in there. Sometimes from the factory over time, these connectors just corrode away. And believe me, I wish I had these pliers when I just did the fuse block terminal repair on my El Camino. But how does that actually work? All right, let's give it a go. We're just going to ping that guy off. We're going to do the normal because right there, yes, I realize I'm doing the 14 instead of the 16, but you know, it just seems to be working. So these terminals are unique in that they have a crimp on the wire and a crimp on the insulation. So you have to use a set of dies that accommodates that appropriately. And these seem to do the job really nicely. So the idea is you lay the wire in there and the insulation goes in there. And then you take the appropriate size here and you'll notice it's got kind of a step inside the jaws. That's to accommodate the step that you're seeing there. And I'm just going to make sure I get the correct side here. Yep, we're good. So we're just going to and it makes a crimp that's nice and crimps down on the insulation. And wouldn't you know, but I actually missed it just a little bit. I was a little bit behind it. So let's just come in here and give it a little bit more of a... And now it's locked on the wire, it's locked on the insulation, is extremely solid, and you don't have to mess around with trying to, you know, squeeze and crimp and squeeze and crimp and squeeze and, you know, do something nasty with a set of vice grips and just crimp that onto the insulation. It does it in one smooth motion. I know I've chased my share of poor crimps and terrible electrical connections over time. I've been working on my El Camino for over 20 years, and this thing was an electrical nightmare when I started. And I tell you, I wish I had a set of these when I was just starting out, but you know something? I got them now. Everything's going to be good. So with the drop in price of these ratchet style crimpers, I'd go so far as to say this is almost a necessary part of your toolbox, especially if you're planning on doing any electrical wiring whatsoever. Now, I'm not going to say that this isn't still a viable option when you're out there in the middle of nowhere and need to get something done fast. And we know that I've made many electrical connections on this car with this set of pliers specifically. But you know something? It's making me second guess things just a little bit. I'm going to be using these guys for every terminal that I put on this car. I want to hear from you guys. What's the worst electrical fault that you've ever found and experienced in your time doing this stuff? Now, thanks for watching, guys. And if you like this video, check this one out over here. I know you'll like that one too.